1990. You'd already been through the Riverside accident. Season finale at Atlanta. All hell broke loose on a pit stop. And so just take me through what you remember.
Normal day, had no idea that anything was any different than any other day. You had...
Now, Mike Rich had taken Chuck's place, correct?
Yeah, we had several people. They had auditions for different pit crew members and selected the people. But through the course of the years, there were... This is what I tried to get them to do at the Hall of Fame down here whenever they were selecting people to put into the Hall of Fame, was that you had crew members from probably... I've been trying to think back on my part of this, which went from the beginning to the first part of 91. There were probably 3 generations of pit crew that worked together the longest. Okay. Out of those 3, the last one, when we went to Atlanta in 90, we'd won the pit crew competition at Rockingham. And in my career of changing tires and being on pit road, this last generation we went to Atlanta with in 1990 was the best one I'd ever worked with.
In what respect? How so?
All respects. It was like we could sense each other's movements and know the times don't reflect that. And it's like I tell people, it's how they do the pit stops on the competition that are different from what pit road is. I'm talking about all in all, everything, not just the pit crew competition in 1990, but being on pit road in 1990. Working with them, it was, like I said, we could almost sense each other's movements, and we knew if one had an area that they might have had a little bit of a not even a mistake in, but let's say you might have a lug nut fall off. There was always the guy that carried the tires. I had put a tire up on, and he started to take the other tire and go, and he saw one of the lug nuts had fell off of the stud where it's held in place till I can get around to it. While I'm tightening the other lug nuts, he reaches in there and puts the other lug nut up to where I can hit that lug nut. Okay, it's almost like a sixth sense of I know that something, I need to stay here for a minute, something needs my attention. And maybe the jack man senses that I had a problem getting a tire on. Maybe the clearance on the fender was one, because Daytona and Talladega was the worst because of the sidewalls on the tires were so big. They were hard to get in, and that was one of the places, 2 of the places that you wanted the fender to cover the tire well to be part of the aero package. So you had to be careful at Daytona and Talladega how the tire went up into the wheel well, and once it did, how squarely you went on the hub, because if it didn't go on square, it pushed lug nuts off. So you had to be aware of all of these things going on. And then also, too, where the jack peg was on the car, because was the front end going to come up a foot before the back came up off the ground, or was the back and the front going to come up even? And the exhaust pipes kind of dictated a lot of times where the jack peg was. So you had no idea until you got to the track, got all your weights in, got everything set, and then you realize, well, maybe you changed sway bar, and now the front end don't drop down like it did before, not enough clearance, and you're going to have to be careful here. All this is determined right before race time. So you got to remember all of this is playing in your mind. As well as even down to the age of the glue. Okay, so you're gluing lug nuts on,
Yeah.
and how was this glue? Because you need the freshest glue. Well, I ran out of the freshest glue because we've done 10 pit stops and I'm out of glue. So you run around trying to find the stuff that you need, and then you're looking at the socket on the air wrench saying, I need another socket because this one is done worn out because you had so many pit stops. Went to Dover one time. This was probably 85 at Dover. We did 10 four-tire pit stops during the race. 10 four-tire stops. And then somebody asked me a couple races after that, when do y'all practice? I said, Dover. I said, Dover. Because that day wore me out.
Yeah.
And I'd done that a long time. That day wore me out. And then I still got in the truck and drove home. So, yeah. So it's a long day. But pit road is one of those things where you're consciously going through all of these things. I did a pit stop at Michigan. And the good thing about Michigan was it's a long pit road and the pit stalls are very big. Okay, I'm changing. I run over and change. I think it's Sterling that is pitted just in front of us. And he was already in the stall when Bill came in. So I run around the car. I'm down on the ground and I hear all this commotion. And I'm finishing up with my stop and I feel heat. And I'm thinking, what the heck? And I get up from changing my right front, and I get up, and the gas man had started a little bit of fire, which is easy to do off of the rear brakes, and a little bit of spillage from the can. Yeah. So he drops the can, and all of this is on fire right there, and I'm thinking to myself, do I want to get burnt up or do I want to get run over? And I'm thinking, those are the things that don't happen often, but boy, do they disrupt your rhythm on what you're trying to do. So I look and I see the fireman coming, so I'm thinking, we're good. I run around the car, do the left front, the fireman's there putting it out, and Bill leaves. All of this happens in 12, 15 seconds. It's over and gone that quick. And had I not heard the commotion and felt the heat, I wouldn't have known anything was going on. But I felt the heat on the right side of the car. And I'm thinking, this is not going to be good. But also, too, it's like on my arm, I've got a scar on my arm where it was Darlington 87. And they usually did a boot in the right front spring, so as the race went on and the track got rubbered in and the track changed, you could pull that boot out and soften up the right front. And on that particular pit stop, Ernie said, pull the boot on the right front because it had a piece of safety wire with a loop in it, and you just grab it with your finger and pull it. And I'd done that times before, but this time I reached around and grabbed it and pulled it out, and I smelled something. And I thought, what the heck is that? So get the boot pulled out, put the tire back on, run back behind the wall, and I had burned a place. The rotor was red hot. Oh. And I had burned a place on my arm. It took a month for that thing to scab over. After that, you learn your lesson. I wore a cuff, a sleeve cuff on the Kevlar cuffs after that, every race after that.
So Atlanta, what do you remember about?
Yeah, I was trying to block that out.
I know.
Did you not notice? The worst thing in Atlanta was seeing Mike at the back of the car, and I knew it was bad. One of those days where didn't expect anything like that. Don't even know at that time what was going through my mind except praying that he was okay and would be okay. And it was another deal where I got another back adjustment that was beyond belief, and slammed to the pavement again because it was another shoulder. And the good thing was, though, that you were up and going. But the concern was Mike, because I can remember coming home after the race and cleaning up and going back to the hospital, and we stayed there for a long time. And tough day. That's honestly all I can say. It was one of the toughest days that I've ever had on pit road.
You've talked a couple of times about doing the first 3 or 4 races of '91.
Mm.
I would assume that Atlanta accident had a part in that.
Yeah, Atlanta was the reason for that, because I came home and I thought about that for several weeks. Me and my wife had a good many talks, but ultimately it came down to what she said about you're going to have to choose what you do. And I had already thought about, because I told you about what got me into thinking about not doing pit road, and Deb Williams doing that spotlight and cup scene, and coming down to the question in 5 years, and you fill in the blanks. Okay, so you throw all of this, you factor all this in, and I pretty much decided that I wasn't going to do it anymore, but I couldn't just end where it ended. I had to know in myself, could I still do it? Yeah. Did I have what it takes to do pit road again? It was the pit road at most every racetrack with no speed limit on pit road was the most chaotic, most unorganized, adrenaline rush you could ever have. I've never, the feeling that you get running out there, and I remember the race that Bill ran, he had a broken wrist. This was after the tire blowout at Daytona, where he broke his wrist. Came to Atlanta, and he was coming down pit road, and Tommy Jackman had already run out. I ran out behind him. Bill's coming, and car ain't slowing down much at all. And I look and I see the rear wheels lock up, and I said, this is not good. And I'm standing out in pit road, so is Tommy. And the lucky part is that nothing else is coming down pit road yet. But I make the decision right then and there to go to the wall, because I've got the wrench, I've got the hose. I could have thrown it and stood where I was at, but you still don't know. The car is still probably running 75 or 80 at this point, and there's not much time to think about it. So I take my wrench and hose and I run to the wall. Well, I barely made it when the car slid through. And Tommy stood on pit road. He still had the jack in his hand. Whether Bill sensed that if he locked the brakes up anymore, it was going to turn sideways, at least he had the forethought to know that if he didn't lock it up, he could go straight through as long as he had a gap to go through. So he barely had enough gap to go through, and he slid through. But that was another one of those things where you catch your breath and go again. And what an adrenaline rush. Coming back to where you're at, first 4 races in 91, you end up at Atlanta, and that's the last race of the 4. And I could not believe, with a speed limit on pit road, how boring that was. It was not the same. Whether you wanted to do the job or not anymore, the job changed.
So if there'd still been if there hadn't been a pit road speed, you would have still kept going?
The jury's still out on that, okay?
That is not what I expected you to say.
I know it's not. It's not what I expected to feel. But when we went to speed limit on pit road, it's like, is the race car ever going to get here? Is this ever going to, it's like everything was in slow motion.
Uh-huh.
Everything was slow-mo. And here comes the car. Here comes the car. It's like snail and snail's race. It was so boring. And what drew me to it in the first place was that speed, that getting the job done and being able to do this and proving to yourself that you could do this. I think this did more for me than anything in my life, as far as giving me the confidence to know that you could do the things you set your mind to do. This is, and I've thought about this so much, about doing that job and what you could do, and situations and split-second decisions on what you did or didn't do, or how you did these things, how it made such a difference. I love that feeling of whenever we went to Michigan one time. This was probably during the 88 season, might have been 87 or 88 season. And you have those days that just absolutely flow. Around on pit road, and no more than I got over there, lug nuts off, other tire on, and I looked around, and the rear tire guy, he ain't even got his tire off yet. And it's like, oh, nailed that one. You're so proud of yourself. But it's what it does. It's not the fact that you're trying to please anybody else or trying to make yourself something you're not, but that confidence it gave you to know that you could do this, especially running for the million. The pressure that was on to run for the million.
Yeah.
And after that first stop, after settled in after that first stop, it was all good, all good.